All my fellow mitpalalim at the Bet Garden Minyan, a good and Erev Shabbos. First and foremost, I hope everyone is well and secure. Be'ezrat Hashem, we should hear many Yeshuot v'nechamot. On a much lighter note, we have a practical issue to deal with this Shabbos. Thank God, home front security measures have been lifted a bit, which means we are allowed to daven together to an extent. And therefore, the question is, do we have to make up Parshat Ba'alotcha that we missed last week because we were not able to daven in a minyan? This goes back to the Or Zarua, one of the early Rishonim of Ashkenaz, who brings a Maaseh Colonia, probably Cologne, Germany, in which in Parshat Emor, for some reason or another, they couldn't read the Parsha, and it came to the next week, Parshat Bahar, and Tziva, Harav Eliezer ben Rabbi Shimon Zatzal, Latchil b'Parshat Emor, going on, V'li Krotayim, Pahar Sinai, Haruyali Krota B'ota Shabbat. From our perspective, you have to make up Parshat Ba'alotcha together with Parshat Shlach of this week. And he goes on to explain why. Because the takana of Moshe Rabbeinu was to finish all the Torah readings in 1 year, and ultimately there is of great importance to consistency. Haraya, he says, if there's a yontiv, we push off the Parsha to the next week. We don't say, well, it was supposed to be Parshat Shmini and Pesach came, so let's forget about Parshat Shmini. No, we push it off to right after Pesach. So too here, there was, for some reason or another, a cancellation of the Parsha. He basically says, push it off to the next week and read it together with the Parsha of that week, so the consistency of the Parshas will stay together. And this is the way the Ramah in Shulchan Aruch paskins, in bitlu Shabbat Echad Kriyat HaParasha B'tzibur, L'Shabbat Haba'ah Korein Ota Parasha Im HaParasha Sheyechet L'Ota Shabbat. If for some reason or another they did not read that Parsha in a minyan the Shabbos prior, Parshat Ba'alotcha, you have to this week read Ba'alotcha and Shlach. That's what the Ramah paskins in Shulchan Aruch. However, there is a dissenting opinion, and that is Rav Ephraim Zalman Malgariot. And ultimately in Shari Ephraim he says that this whole halacha is in bitlu atzibor kriya be'ones yashlimu Shabbat Haba'ah. Namely, there was a minyan, and for some reason or another, they didn't lane. Either there was no laner, or the Sefer Torah was puzzle, whatever it might be. However, im lo bitlu ba'ones, rak shelo haya sham asara b'shabbat. But if they indeed did not have a minyan the Shabbos prior, then ein sarich lahashlim b'shabbat haba'ah. You do not have to make up the Torah reading the next Shabbos. And on the Perush, Neshare Ephraim called the Pitchei Sha'arim, he explains the Dafka Hecha the B'nei Chiyuvahim Likrot Elashira Lemhonis. In other words, the obligation to lane is only when 10 people come together on Shabbos morning. But if 10 people don't come together, there's no obligation to lane. This is based on the Ramban that says that Kriyas HaTorah is what we call Chovat HaTzibor, communal obligation. Unlike the Ra'avan, who says it's a personal obligation, and the Koreh B'Torah, the laner, fulfills it for us. The bottom line is, most poskim did paskin that it was a Chovat HaTzibur, and therefore he says, it's only if 10 people were together, and they didn't lane. But if 10 people were not together, there's no obligation whatsoever. So we have a machlokas, but it seems like the Ramah in Shulchan Aruch did paskin, you have to make it up. The question that we have is, well, if that is the case, is this only if everyone missed the Kriyas HaTorah, or only the majority? Because last Shabbos there were some minyans in some places, meaning some people maybe heard Kriyas HaTorah. So the Chayei Adam has a suffix about this, and indeed says maybe, indeed, it's only if the entire congregation didn't hear Kriyas HaTorah, namely 10 people and more. At the end of the day, it seems like the Ran points to the position that even if the majority didn't hear, you make up Kriyas HaTorah. And this is the way that the Biur Halacha quotes him. However, it seems like the Aruch HaShulchan is very clear-cut and says, B'Kriyas HaTorah nirali barur, dechol deleka asara shelo shamu Kriyat HaTorah and likrot b'Torah. You only make up Kriyas HaTorah when there's 10 people in the room that didn't hear Kriyas HaTorah. At the end of the day, the Mishnah Berurah does paskin that if in that particular shul they didn't lane, plus the majority of the people in that shul didn't hear Kriyat Torah the week before, you do make it up this week. And even if there are other shuls that did lane, it makes no difference. You go by the majority of the people in that particular shul that week. So basically where we are at this point is that there is a machlokas if we even have to make up Kriyas Torah. But it seems like the Ramah Paskin, like the Or Zarua, that if the whole congregation did not hear Ba'alotcha, they should try to make it up this week. And that would be true even if it was only the majority of the shul and not the whole shul in and of itself. Well, if that is the case, how do we do it? Namely, how are we supposed to connect to Parshas? So the Shari Rachamim, which is a perush on the Sefer of Rav Ephraim Zalman Margaliot called Shari Ephraim, comes along and says in the name of a book called Tzinsenet Haman that you're supposed to treat it like Tashlumin of davening. Namely, first Parshas Shlach, that's the Chiyuv of the day, and then the Tashlumin, Parshas Ba'alotcha. But he himself says no one paskins that way. And he, together with the Kaf HaChaim, says you can't do it that way. Why? I'll quote from the Kaf HaChaim, Tzarich likotam kesidra mishum Torah Hashem tmima. The Torah of God is pure. It was dictated word for word, letter to Moshe Rabbeinu, and therefore the consistency, which is the whole reason we're doing this, is important. So you read first Ba'alotcha, and then Shlach, and that's the way the Mishnah Berurah paskins, sheyikra'u mitchila shel Shabbat ha'ba'ar, v'achar kach shel Shabbat zu. How do you divide up the parshas if indeed you do that? So Rav Ephraim Zalman Margaliot says we treat it like a double parsha. Namely, basically, 3 aliyahs in Parshas Ba'alotcha, 3 aliyahs in Parshat Shlach, and the 4th aliyah will connect the two. However, the Kaf HaChaim disagrees. And this seems to be Rov HaPoskim. They basically say that at the end of the day, you can't treat it like a double parsha because there isn't a double parsha this week. You have to read Kohen, which is all of Ba'alotcha, including 3 psukim in Parshas Shlach, at least, maybe the whole Rishon, and then continue. And indeed, the Bir Halacha seems to say the same thing in the name of the Shari Ephraim, though I didn't find it in the Shari Ephraim. He indeed says that Yatchilim HaKohen mirosh HaSeder shel Shabbat HaAvar v'likrot imod kol ma shekara b'Shabbat HaAvar v'losif od gimel psukim o yoter mima shelo kara b'Shabbat HaAvar v'sham yafsik HaKohen v'yivarech la'acharea v'shuv yikra'eu kedarkan. So to make a long story short, from the perspective of laws of Kriyas Torah, we were in a minyan last week, and therefore we weren't obligated in Kriyas Torah, and we don't have to make it up. But the Or Zarua, paskin by the Ramah, says, from the perspective of consistency for the congregation to finish all the parshas of the year, it would be a beautiful chumrah this week to make it up. So in our shul, it happens to be that the majority of people did hear Laining last week, and therefore we will not be Laining 2 parshas this week. Had it been a situation where the majority did not, I believe it's a nice chumrah to do. How do you divide up the parsha? Indeed, it's going to be a lot of onus on our poor Baal Koreh to read the entire Ba'alotcha and then Shlach. If it's impossible for him, he needs to take a break, you can definitely somech on Rav Ephraim Zalman Margaliot, who says, no, treat it like a double parsha. After all, if indeed we're only doing this because it's so important to keep consistency, then it's like our obligation this week to read a double parsha, not a makeup and a real parsha. And therefore, if it's impossible, we'll only read Shlach, but if possible, it's a beautiful chumrah to indeed keep the words of the Ramah, to make up last week and then to add this week's parsha, and continuing this Ashkenazic tradition that started long ago, continuing in Israel, even through these very hard times that Be'ezrat Hashem we will get out of sooner than later. Wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom and many, many Besarot Tovot.